North Korea is located in Eastern Asia and occupies the northern half of the Korean peninsula. It is bordered by the Korean Bay and the Sea of Japan. It shares political borders with China, South Korea, and Russia. Its area is a total of 120,540 square kilometers. In comparison, it is slightly smaller than the state of Mississippi. Its latitude is 40 degrees north and 127 degrees east. 80% of North Korea's land area is composed of mountains and uplands. Pyeongtaek is the volcanic region near China's border and is estimated 1,400 and 2,000 meters above sea level. The Haemin Range is an estimated 1,756 meters in height. Other mountain ranges include the Naemin Range, which is located in the north-central part of North Korea and runs in the north and south direction, making communication between the eastern and western parts of the country rather difficult. The Gangmin Range is a mountain range that extends from North Korea to the China border and is approximately 1,638 meters in height. The Taebek Range extends into South Korea and is famous for its North Korea has a continental climate with 4 distinct seasons. Long winters bring bitterly cold and clear weather intercepted with snowstorms as a result of northern and northern-western winds that blow from Siberia. The daily average high and low temperatures for Pyongyang in January are negative 3 degrees Celsius and negative 13 degrees Celsius. The average snowfall is 37 days each winter. The weather is likely to be particularly harsh in the northern mountainous regions. Summers tend to be short, hot, humid, and rainy because of the southern and southern-eastern monsoon winds that bring moisture from the Pacific Ocean. The daily average high and low temperatures for Pyongyang in August are 29 degrees Celsius and 20 degrees Celsius. On average, approximately 60% of all precipitation occurs from June to September. Typhoons also affect the peninsula on average at least once every summer. North Korea often has late spring droughts, followed by severe flooding, as well as occasional typhoons during the early fall. As a cause of numerous typhoons and flash flooding, as well as deforestation, many droughts have since plagued the land. Soldiers of the family of the 1900s have killed an estimated 1 million people. Before the separation, Korea was composed of many religions, such as Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. In 1785, the first Christian missionary, a Roman Catholic, entered Korea. The government prohibited the propaganda of Christianity, and by 1863, there were only some 23,000 Roman Catholics in the country. The government ordered harsh persecution of Korean Christians, a policy that continued until the country was opened to Western countries in 1881. Protestant missionaries began entering Korea during the 1880s. They established schools, universities, hospitals, and orphanages, and played a significant role in modernizing the country. Before 1948, Pyongyang was an important Christian center. 1/6 of its population of about 300,000 residents were Christian. Between 1945, when Soviet forces first occupied the northern half of the Korean peninsula, and the end of the Korean War in 1953, many Christians considered bad elements by the Northern Korean authorities fled to South Korea to escape the socialist regime's anti-religious policies. Today, Juche is the #1 religion in Northern Korea. Juche is no longer just an ideology, but a full-fledged religion that worships Kim Il-sung as a god, and his son, Kim Jong-il, as the son of God. Whether or not Kim Jong-un is now worshipped as the grandson of God remains to be seen. North Koreans are forced to worship the images of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il that are plastered everywhere over the nation. Each family must have both of their images hanging at home on the best wall and must bow before them. Tourists aren't even allowed to take a picture of the statue or image if it is not a complete picture, and it must be taken from a lower level. The average family in South Korea has around 1.2 or 1.3 children per family. This is one of the lowest rates in the world. North Korea's statistic is unknown, but due to the constant famine conditions, the birth rate is very low, especially in the cities. The infant mortality rate is very high due to the poor medical system. It is considered good to have more than 1 kid, but the economies in both countries are such that it is very expensive to support more than 1 kid for more families. Relative to income, rents are high, food is expensive, and there's a cultural expectation that the kid be put in a private cram school all day long. This really adds up, and it's a financial strain to even raise 1 kid, let alone 2. On November 1st, 2010, 436 South Koreans visited the North for 3 days to meet their 97 North Korean relatives, whom they have been separated from since the Korean War. Korean, known as Hangul, is the official language of both Koreas. There are no other native languages spoken there, but English is a secondary spoken language. The division of Korea into South Korea and North Korea was the result of the 1945 Allied victory in World War II, ending the Empire of Japan's 35-year colonial rule of Korea. The United States and the Soviet Union agreed to temporarily occupy the country with a zone of control along the 38th parallel. The purpose of this was to establish a Korean provincial government which would become free and independent in due course. Though elections were scheduled, the Soviet Union refused to cooperate with the United Nations plans to hold general and free elections in the two Korean zones, and as a result, a communist state was permanently established under Soviet rule in the north, and a pro-Western state was set up in the south. The two superpowers backed different leaders, and two states were effectively established, each of which claimed sole reign over the whole Korean peninsula. The Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953, left the two Koreas separated by the Korean Demilitarized Zone. The Korean War ended with the split of the two Koreas and 128,650 dead American soldiers, as well as 4,000 missing. This later led on to the Cold War, and the Korean War is known as the war that did not end. North Korea holds as many as 120,000 people in the system of concentration and detention camps. 400,000 people have died in these camps from torture, starvation, disease, and execution, and some continue to die today. These reports, in the context, estimate that North Korea has allowed between 600,000 and 2,500,000 of its people to starve to death, while the government squanders the nation's resources on weapons and luxuries for its ruling elites. North Korea's oppression and political target, starvation of its people, collectively constitute the world's greatest ongoing atrocity, and almost certainly the most catastrophic anywhere on Earth since the end of the Khmer Rouge regime in 1979. Transportation in North Korea is severely limited, as are the entrances to the country. The standard route to and from North Korea is by plane or train from Beijing, People's Republic of China. Transport directly to and from South Korea has been possible on a limited scale from 2003 and 2008, when the road was open. Freedom of movement in North Korea is also limited, as citizens are not allowed to move around freely inside their own country. Fuel constraints and the near absence of private automobiles have regulated road transportation to a secondary role. The road network was estimated to be around 31,200 kilometers in 1999, up from between 23,000 and 30,000 kilometers in 1990, of which only 1,717 kilometers, 7.5%, are paved. The rest are of dirt, crushed stone, or gravel and are poorly maintained. Although North Korea boasts having one of the largest armies in the world, a lot of its military equipment is outdated compared to the rest of the world. North Korea's tightly controlled and isolated population prevents the rise of information technology, specifically cell phones and the intranet. It is an unprecedented development. In the last decade, a domestic intranet was launched and a cell phone network was created. Both of these form a closed domestic system, which the regime hopes will allow for productivity gain from increased coordination and the sharing of state-approved information, while keeping out forging influences at the same time. Some internet is allowed, but only a selected few are given access to it. However, North Korea still relies heavily on electronic telephones, electronic copy machines, videocassettes, and other outdated equipment. Farming in North Korea is concentrated in the flatlands of the 4 West Coast provinces, where a longer growing season, level land, adequate rain, and good irrigation soil permit the most intensive cultivation of crop. A narrow strip of similarly fertile land runs through an eastern seaboard, Hyeon Province. Major crops include rice and potatoes. Only about 17% of total landmass, or approximately 20,000 km squared, is arable, of which 14,000 km squared is well suited for cereal cultivation. The major portion of the country is the rugged mountain terrain. Since its founding in 1958, North Korea has remained a communist state with a dictatorship. Originally led by its founding father, Kim Il-sung, later by his son, Kim Jong-il, and now with the current leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. North Korea is a communist country, promising communism ideology, such as a theoretical economic system characterized by the collective ownership of property and by the organization of labor for all. Since the end of the Korean War, tensions between North and South Korea have remained. For example, according to CNN, in 1968, North Korea unsuccessfully attempted to assassinate South Korea's president. In 1983, a bombing in Myanmar was linked to North Korea, killed 17 South Korean officials, and in 1987, North Korea was accused of bombing a South Korean plane. Fighting has also repeatedly occurred both land and sea borders because each nation is continually trying to unify the peninsula and its own system of government. In 2010, tensions between North and South Korea were especially high after a South Korean warship was sunk on March 26. South Korea claims that North Korea sunk the Cheonan in the Yellow Sea off the South Korean island of Byangyeong. North Korea denied responsibility for the attack, and tensions between the two nations have been high ever since. With a population of 24.7 million people, North Korea has a GDP of $40 billion and a 0.8% growth rate. North Korea received a 1.0 score in economic freedom. It has long since isolated itself from foreign trade, and its constant military threat have earned it many sanctions in the world economy. It ranked 178th in the world, trading behind Cuba. North Korea runs trading companies in Thailand, Hong Kong, Macau, and Cambodia, which export North Korean goods, mostly clothing, plastics, and minerals such as copper. At the same time, they import various kinds of foodstuff, light machinery, electronic goods, and in the past, dual-purpose chemicals, which have a civilian as well as military applications. Those companies were, and still are, run by the powerful Daosung Group of companies. North Korean culture is based on traditional Korean culture, but developed since the establishment of North Korea in 1994. For example, they still practice a traditional dance called Jinju, while their sister in South Korea practices modern-day dances. Their art, music, and theater are all centered around their Juche ideology and praise the greatness of their leaders, such as the Spring Friendship Art Festival, dedicated to showing North Koreans and the world their love and respect for their leaders, or the Mask Games, also known as the Aragon Games, a performance that has earned the Guinness World Record in which thousands upon thousands of people perform for an almost empty audience. Another fact is also their architecture, such as the Juche Tower located in Pyongyang City, or the Palace of the Children, a school in which the most elite students practice to excel in their talents and perform for many tourists.